Hello and good morning friends, welcome to CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, in this session of ours today, we are going to talk on library sciences, and under library sciences we are going to learn what are those terminologies which are basically used in library sciences. That is, our today's topic is basic terms of library classification. For this we have again with us in our studios Dr. Manorma Tripathi. She is a deputy librarian in JNU. So first of all, I would like to welcome our guest, Dr. Manorma Tripathi. Ma'am, welcome to the EduSet lecture, and I would like you to tell our students what are those terms or how classification is done while studying library sciences.
As we all know, libraries procure different forms of documents like books, periodicals, theses and dissertations, CDs, and they are organized for the users. This organization is done by following a particular system so that books can be easily retrieved and used whenever they are needed. This organization is also known as classification. That means books or different documents, they are organized or classified according to a particular helpful sequence, and by classifying and organizing them, they are kept in a easy helpful sequence in the library so that they can be used and retrieved whenever the need arises, whenever they are required by the users or readers. So in this context, today we are going to focus on various terms or various technical words which are used in library classification. Classification, as the very term indicates, it means arranging things into groups according to features that they have in common. Classification, this word has been derived from the word classifying, which means arranging into groups or making divisions of various entities or various items as per any common characteristic or feature which exist among them. Classification, it provides a system for organizing knowledge. It may be used to organize knowledge represented in any form. Example, books, documents, electronic resources. Why is it used? It is used for organizing knowledge which is represented in various forms like books, documents and electronic resources. Then the other meaning, which is it is a process of sorting the entities. As I said, grouping the different items, grouping the different entities into sub-aggregates according to on the basis of some common feature which they possess. That means there are different characteristics, there are different items, and they are divided into various divisions, they are categorized into different groups. They are categorized into different classes on the basis of some common characteristic which they have. For example, if in a class of students, if we want to make some kind of classification, if we want to make some kind of groups, then how can we do that? We can make groups according to the basis of males and females, how many girl students are there, how many boy students are there. We can make groups according to height. That means we are making the groups, we are dividing the students into various groups, into various classes on the basis of some common characteristic which they have, or on the basis of percentage which they score in exams. So these are the common characteristics, male or female, number on the basis of percentage which they achieve in their exams, or on the basis of height or weight. So these are the common characteristics which exist among the students in a class, and on the basis of these common characteristics we use to classify them, to divide them into groups, to categorize them into different categories, and this is also an example of classification. It is classification, it is a process of the division of universe into groups plus arranging the groups into definite sequence. That means it's not merely division of the universe on the basis of some common characteristic, on the basis of some common feature which exists among them, but it also follows there has to be a helpful sequence, a definite sequence among them. Now coming to entity, what happens in classification? We classify different items into various groups, different entities. So what is an entity? An entity, it is any existent, concrete or conceptual, that is a thing or an idea is an entity, a book, a subject, calmness, a school of thought. That means it is anything which exists. It may be concrete, for example, boy, girl, conceptual, it can be any kind of thought like calmness, softness and so on, or any particular school of thought. These are all entities, and when all these entities, they collect to form a collection, they collect to form a group, it is known as a universe. That means a universe is a collection of all the entities, and entities is anything which exists. It may be concrete or conceptual. Then in a universe too, we have two types. We have a finite universe, a universe with a finite number of entities. An infinite universe means there is a never-ending number of entities. Now aggregate. Aggregate is a collection of entities without any special arrangement. That means there are examples, for example, a group of boys, a collection of books, a group of countries. It is all, these are all instances, these are all examples of aggregate. And a universe is also an aggregate in a particular context. In a particular context, it implies, that means there may be a universe of books, there may be a universe of boys, there may be a universe of countries, and so on and so forth. Any sub-aggregate of entities formed by the division of the entities of a universe, that means an aggregate can further be subdivided into further sub-aggregate on the basis of some common characteristic or feature. Class, it means it's a group or a division with some common feature. When we say a class of students, that means there is some common feature. All the students, they study the same course, they are in the same class, they are of the same level. That is a class, a group, division with some common feature. It is a generic term, and in the context of library science, the class can be used to indicate, to mean a basic class. It indicates a compound class. It may indicate a complex class. For example, a basic class, we have library science. This is a basic class in colon classification. Then various other basic classes are, for example, botany, literature, sociology, economics, and so on and so forth. Compound class, when there is an addition of an isolate with it, then it becomes a compound class. For example, agriculture is a basic class, but if we say wheat, we are adding one isolate with it. Wheat agriculture in India, India is another isolate. So when two isolates, when one or more than one isolates are added, then it becomes a compound class. Complex class is again a class. It refers to when more than one subject, when there is union of two subjects, and then it is an example of complex class. For instance, when we say mathematics or statistics for biologists, that means there are two classes. One is biology and the other one is mathematics. This is an example of complex class. So all these classes, in general, in layman terminology, class, as we understand, it is a group or division where entities or items, they have some common feature. In the context of library science, this class refers to various further specialized items like basic class, compound class, or complex class. Now coming to what is subject. Subject, it is an organized or systematized body of ideas. Any idea or the thought which is contained, which is described in a book, is the subject of that particular book. A book, what is? It is a collection of organized body of ideas. So any idea, any thought content, thought matter of a particular book is the subject of that book. As this slide shows, 5 laws of library science. Prolegomena to library classification, colon classification, chapter CF, section CF4. These are, as we all know, name of library science books, and the subject of these books is certainly library science. But as you can see, as you move down the sequence, you'll find that the extension of the subject is decreasing, whereas intention is increasing. Extension, 5 laws of library science is broader in scope. Extension means breadth or scope, whereas as we move down the line, we will see that the subject becomes more specialized. That means more isolates are being added, the scope gets decreases, and intention and more isolates are being added to it. That means subject is becoming more specialized. 5 laws of library science, we know it's broader in scope. Then prolegomena to library classification, the subject matter restricts itself to classification only. Then colon classification is further restricted to one of the schemes. Chapter CF, that means chapter CF is a particular chapter of a book. Here further the scope is decreased and the subject matter is more specialized, gets more specialized in nature. And section CF, that means this is a particular chapter, particular section, particular part of the chapter CF, and it deals with a small aspect. That means it is more specialized in nature. So we have seen subject is a organized or systematized bodies of ideas, or any thought matter, subject thought or ideas which are contained in a book, they are known as subject of that particular book. And subject matter in an extension, as you see the examples, on the slides, the subject matter, the extension or the scope or breadth of the topic decreases, and the subject or the topic become more specialized as more isolates are being added. Macro subject, as I just talked, it's a subject of great extension and small intention. It may be a basic subject, it may be a compound subject with a basic subject and a few isolates as its components. Macro subject is a subject of great extension, that means bigger extension and smaller intention. It may be a basic subject, for example, we may have library science. A compound subject with a basic subject and a few isolates. We may have various activities, for example, classification. Classification is one of the activities in library science. That means library science is a basic subject, and when you say library classification, it means intention increases over here and extension is decreased. A macro subject is usually embodied in the form of a book. For example, in the previous slide, as we saw, 5 laws of library science, it's a book. So it's a macro subject. When you say prolegomena to library classification, it becomes lesser. The book talks about a special field. That means extension is decreased and intention is increased. Micro subject. A micro-subject is a compound subject with a basic subject and a large number of isolates its components. A micro-subject is usually in the form of an article in a journal or a part or chapter of the book. As we saw in the earlier slide, that micro-subject is a compound subject with a basic subject. When we say prolegomena to library classification, that means the book talks of a particular area of bigger basic class, which is library science, and the book talks of about classification. So classification, prolegomena to library classification, this becomes a micro subject. Here the intention increases and the extension decreases. Or a micro subject can be about a particular article. Usually it may be in the form of article in a journal or part or chapter of the book. If we say chapter CF in prolegomena to library classification, that means we are talking of particular chapter in the book, and it implies that it is a micro subject. Here the intention is increased and extension is decreased. Now, what is an isolate idea? An isolate idea is any idea which forms a component of a subject, but by itself it cannot be a subject. Any idea, any unitary idea, any single idea which can be component of a subject, but it cannot be a subject in itself. So an isolate idea is a single idea, is a unitary idea. It can be combined with a basic subject as one of the components, but it cannot be a subject by itself. For example, we have child. Child, it is an example of an isolate idea. It cannot be a subject by itself, because if one says child, it doesn't indicate any sense, it doesn't convey any sense. But when it is attached with a subject, for example, or it is attached with the subject, for example, if we say diseases in children, that means now it makes a sense, it conveys some idea, it conveys some subject. If we say sociology of children, child by itself doesn't make a sense, but when we say sociology of children, with a basic class, it is attached. Child was a basic concept, was a unitary concept. By itself, it did not convey any sense, but when it is attached to sociology, when we say sociology of children, it becomes a subject. Psychology of children, it becomes a subject. That means isolate idea is a single idea, is a unitary idea, is a unitary component, which by itself cannot become a subject, but it can be attached with some other subject, basic subject, to become a subject, to become a compound subject, or it can become a complex subject. Sociology of children, psychology of children, these are instances, these are examples of compound subject. So we have been using these terms, basic subject, compound subject, and complex subject. Basic class, basic subject, or basic class, it is a subject without any isolate idea. That means here we have a basic class, we have a subject, and no isolate idea is attached. For example, when we say mathematics, it is a basic class by itself. When we say chemistry, it is a basic class by itself. When we say education, it is a basic class in itself. It does not have any isolate idea attached to it. But when some isolate idea is attached to the basic class, it becomes a compound class. For instance, we have mathematics, which I said is a basic class. But when a component, or when an isolate, or when any other idea like solids is attached to it, it becomes a compound subject. For instance, geometry of solids. Mathematics was a single subject. Under that we have geometry, which is also a kind of basic class, but when isolate solids is attached, it becomes a compound class. That means we have a basic class. When an isolate idea is attached to it, it becomes a compound class. For instance, chemistry is a basic class. It has no isolate idea, no component attached to it, but when an isolate idea, when another component, halogens, is attached to it, it becomes a compound class. Chemistry of halogens. Education is a basic class, but when another isolate or when another component idea is attached, for example India, it becomes a compound class. So education is basic class, and once the isolate idea of India is attached, it leads to formation of a compound class. So we have understood that compound class is a subject with basic subject and one or more isolate ideas. Education of adolescents. Education is the basic class, and when adolescents, this component, this isolate is attached to it, it becomes a compound class. Similarly, agriculture is the basic class, and when we attach the component of wheat, it becomes a compound subject. Psychology of toddlers, psychology is the basic class, and when we attach this component of toddlers to it, it becomes a compound class. Now, isolate, we are talking of that we are adding isolates to the basic class in order to form a compound class. So what is this isolate? This isolate, as I said, a unitary or a solitary unattached idea which cannot further be divided. It cannot by itself form a subject, and it is known as isolate. Child and rice, these are isolate ideas. They do not convey anything by themselves, they do not convey anything in themselves. They are, that means, as the statement says, it cannot be further divided. Children and rice, these are the component, these are the isolates, these are the ideas which cannot be further divided. But when they are added to some other basic class, as I said, agriculture is the basic class, and if we attach this rice idea, it becomes rice agriculture, then it does convey an idea and it is a compound subject. So isolates, what are these isolates? These are solitary ideas which are not capable enough to represent a subject, and but they can be attached with a single, with a basic class, with a basic subject to convey some other, the idea, the concept of compound subject. So these are the isolates. That means these are the solitary unattached ideas which are not capable enough in themselves to convey some subject, to convey some meaning, but when they are attached with some basic class, they represent a compound class. Now, what is a facet? A facet is a generic term. It is used to denote any component, be it basic subject or in an isolate of a compound subject, and also its respective ranked forms, terms and members. There may be basic facet, isolate facet, geographical facet, educational facet, and so on so forth. That means facet is a generic term and it is used to represent different characteristics. The characteristics may be of a basic subject, characteristics may be of an isolate or compound subject. This facet is a general term, is a generic term which is used to represent the characteristics of different, maybe basic class or isolate component. Complex subject, when subject is formed by joining two or more subjects on the basis of some relation between them. As I told you, this statistics for biologists, that means here two subjects are being united to form a separate subject. Difference between physics and chemistry. Facet, as we discussed, it can be a basic facet, isolate facet, or geographical facet. It is a generic term used to denote any component, be it basic subject or an isolate of a compound subject. category, the totality, the various facets which we have, the totality of facets which have a common characteristics form a category. In subject of library classification, we have kinds of libraries which forms a category of personality. Another category may be of activities, which may be of energy category. Categories in library science, as we know, there are 5 fundamental categories. We have personality, matter, energy, space and time. For instance, in the schedule of library science in colon classification, libraries have been mentioned as personality. So this is one category. Kinds of libraries: academic libraries, special libraries, school libraries, public libraries. These are all kinds of libraries. That means they are personality, one group. Then we may have different kinds of activities, like in libraries what we have different activities like cataloging, classification, maintenance. These are different activities and these are grouped as energy. So we may have different categories, and as we know, these are fundamental categories. Focus. Focus is a generic term. It is used to denote any isolate or any subject and also the number representing any of them. We may have a basic focus or complex focus. Sharpening focus, as the slide shows, there can be basic focus. Focus is a generic term. It indicates any isolate or any subject. And the number in classification, the number or the notation which we use to represent them. So basic focus and complex focus. Sharpening focus. Sharpening focus means decreasing the extension and increasing the intention of focus. Basic focus is sharpened by lengthening its chain. A compound focus is sharpened by increasing the number of isolates. Sharpening its basic focus, sharpening any of its isolate foci. A complex focus can be sharpened by sharpening any of its component classes. For example, if we want to sharpen the focus, it simply means sharpening the focus means adding more and more isolates to the basic focus or to the compound focus. For example, we have agriculture. This is a basic class. If we want to further sharpen it, we will add another focus of wheat agriculture. That means we have sharpened it. We have sharpened the basic class. We further want to sharpen it, so we can add another focus or another component, wheat agriculture in India. If we want to further sharpen it, we can add another component to it. For instance, wheat agriculture in India in 90s. So similar, we have seen we are adding more and more isolate to the basic class in order to sharpen the focus. In order to sharpen the basic focus, we are adding more and more of the isolates. As you know, in the slides it shows basic focus is sharpened by lengthening its chain. Basic class we had agriculture, we added another component to it, wheat, it became wheat agriculture. Further we want to sharpen the focus, we will add another focus to another component to it, wheat agriculture in India. Further intention, wheat agriculture in India in 90s. That means earlier we just had wheat agriculture, then we added India, then we added time. It shows basic focus is sharpened by lengthening its chain. That means chain is getting bigger and bigger, and thus we are sharpening the basic focus. Now array. What does an array mean? An array is simply a group of items. An array is a group in which there may be items which are all items have equal status. That means all items, all entities present in a class or present in a group, they are all of equal rank and status. They are all coordinate in status or in nature. No item in the group is superordinate or subordinate. They are all of equal rank and status. So an array is a group of items and all the items are of equal rank and status. As the slide indicates, a set of classes arranged in the proper sequence derived from a universe on the basis of single characteristics at any step in the progress towards a complete assortment of the entities of the universe. It is a sequence of coordinate classes arranged in some definite order. Then coming to chain, in array what we had a group of, in array there is a group of entities, or array is a class where all the entities or all the constituent units or all the items present in it are of equal status, are coordinate in nature. There is no superordination, subordination, there is no hierarchy, they all exist at the same level. But in chain what happens? It is the sequence of classes. We have one superordinate, we chain all the items, we have one superclass, under that we have classes which are subordinate to that superclass, and there is a chain. That means a hierarchy does exist in a chain, whereas in an array there is no hierarchy. All the constituent units or all the entities are coordinate in nature. But in chain there is one element, under that there is another element which is subordinate to that element which is above it, and then that second unit or that second element will be superordinate to other element or to the other link which will be under it. So as the term indicates, chain is one link comes after another. A chain is the sequence of classes of a universe consisting of a class and of its universe of successive removes carried backwards to any point. It means all the members are of unequal rank and are arranged in the order of constantly decreasing extension and increasing intention. The order in the chain from general to specific, the order in the chain may be from general to specific or in the reverse order of specific to general. Now coming to sequence, we have seen that in the classification, as I said in the initial, when I started, that we arrange the books or we arrange the documents in libraries according to some sequence, according to some arrangement. So sequence is helpful sequence, a systematic or utilitarian arrangement of members of an array is called helpful sequence. Filiatory sequence, it means placing together closely related classes. For example, if we are arranging all the books of classic library science, then what will happen? We will place them in helpful sequence, but under that helpful sequence, all the books of classification will be put together, all the books of cataloging will be put together, and so on and so forth. That means filiatory sequence means placing together closely related classes. Schedules. Schedules, they are written list of classes and their subdivisions arranged in a systematic way along with the corresponding symbols denoting classes. We have seen this, that we are very commonly using the word DDC schedules, colon classification schedules. So what are these schedules? These schedules are list of all the classes and their subdivisions which are there, all the classes and their subdivisions which are there, which exist at a particular point of time in the universe of knowledge. They are arranged together one after another in some helpful sequence, and against them their notation is also listed. So schedules are written list of classes and their subdivisions which exist at particular point of time in universe of knowledge, and against them various notation which denote those particular classes and their subdivisions, they are also listed, they are also enumerated one after another. So this systematic and elaborate list of classes is known as schedules. We have schedules with index, common auxiliary concepts called common subdivisions. Together they are known as classification system. So what is a classification system? Schedules with index, common auxiliary concepts, common subdivisions, they all constitute to form a classification system. When we say we have DDC classification system, that means all the schedules which are there, for instance, DDC DV decimal classification, it comprises 4 volumes. Volume 1 is about introduction, volume 2 is about schedule from 000 to 599, and volume 3 is from 600 to 999. So these are all schedules, introduction, these schedules, and volume 4, which is relative index. These all constitute to form a classification system which is popularly or commonly known as DV decimal classification. So schedules with index all isolates, common auxiliary concepts or common subdivisions, they together are known as classification system. Common auxiliaries, they are standard subdivisions. Standard subdivisions, that means which can be used, they are listed separately, but these standard subdivisions, they can be used with all the schedule, with all the classes of a scheme of classification. So a list of subdivisions or a list of subdivisions which can be commonly used with the different classes of listed in a scheme of classification, they are known as standard subdivisions in DV decimal classification. And common isolates, as the term indicates, they are to be commonly used with all the classes of colon classification, they are known as common isolates. And common auxiliaries, that means those subdivisions or those isolates which are to be commonly used, that means instead of listing them again and again with each class, they are listed separately under the head of common auxiliaries, and they can be used with any of the classes listed in UDC. So in UDC they are known as common auxiliaries. Now coming to classificationist and classifier. Classificationist is a person who designs or develops a particular scheme of classification, whereas a classifier is the one who uses that particular scheme of classification or any particular scheme of classification for classifying documents in the library. So classificationist is, for example, this DV decimal classification was introduced, was developed, was designed by Melville Dewey. So he was the classificationist. This colon classification, this was designed and developed by Dr. S.R. Ranganathan. So he was the classificationist, but we are all using these schemes of classification to classify documents in the libraries. So we are all classifiers. Classificationist is the one who designs and develops any particular scheme of classification, whereas classifier is the one who uses schemes of classification to classify documents in the libraries. Now types of classification schemes. Enumerative, first is enumerative scheme of classification. Enumerative scheme of classification, as the term indicates, it enumerates it lists all classes and their corresponding symbols. They are listed, they are enumerated. It is a schedule which lists all the subjects of the past and present and anticipatable future. Early editions of DDC were enumerative in nature. Enumerative, as you know, as the very term indicates, things are listed one after another. So in any enumerative scheme of classification, all the subjects which exist at a particular point of time, all the subjects of the past which exist, present, and all the subjects of the anticipatable future, they are listed in a particular scheme of classification. And this kind of scheme of classification is known as enumerative. For example, Library of Congress classification scheme, early editions of DDC classification, and Riders International. These are all instances, these are all examples of enumerative scheme of classification, and that means in which all the subjects are listed, all the subjects of the past, all the subjects which exist at a particular point of time, and all the subjects which can be anticipated at a particular point of time, they are listed, and against them their notations are also listed which are to be used while classifying. So such kind of scheme is enumerative. Enumerative, as the term indicates, listing, that means subjects with their notations, they are listed one after another. And of course, when things are simply listed, so schedules, such schedules will be very bulky, will be very big in nature. Now coming to another kind is an almost enumerative. First we talked of, we have just seen enumerative scheme of classification, then we have almost enumerative scheme of classification. It consists of a large schedule enumerating most of the subjects of the past, the present, and the anticipatable future. All the subjects are listed of past, present, and future, and besides the listing of various subjects, there are few schedules of common isolates. They are also listed. So in order to, that means most of the basic subjects, most of the compound subjects, they are listed, but besides those compound subjects, there are some subdivisions, 2 common subdivisions, schedules of common subdivisions are also there, which help in classifying the number, in assigning the number to new compound subjects which are not listed in the scheme of classification. For example, DDC, the present editions, they are all almost enumerative scheme of classification. Then we have faceted classification. A faceted scheme consists of schedules of basic classes, common isolates, and special isolates. In this, no compound subject is enumerated. The class number of any compound subject is constructed with the help of basic subjects, common isolates, and special isolates for each subject. The class number of a compound subject will have connecting digits. That means here in this scheme of classification, we have schedules of basic classes, we have common isolates, we have schedule of special isolates, but here no compound subjects are listed. And for assigning numbers to compound subjects, classifiers, they have to use these common isolates and special isolates, and they have to join the numbers by using various connecting digits. Rigidly faceted classification. In this, the facets and the sequence were predetermined for all the subjects. Predetermined earlier editions like CC edition 1, CC edition 2, colon classification edition 3, they were all rigidly faceted classification. It means the facets and their sequence were predetermined for all the subjects going with the basic class, and the facet formula was pre-decided. The facet formula which was given with each schedule, with each basic class, it pre-decided the special isolates which was to be used with the basic class. Now almost faceted classification. An almost faceted scheme of classification consists of large schedule enumerating most of the subjects of the past, the present, and the anticipatable future, and in addition a few schedules of common isolates and also some schedules of special isolates. The schedules enumerate basic subjects, compound subjects. The class number of more compound subjects are to be constructed with the help of common isolates and special isolates given for each subject. In freely faceted classification, in this scheme what happens? There is no rigid or predetermined facet formula, as for example in faceted scheme of classification, which were earlier editions of colon classification, they were faceted schemes of classification in which the facet formula was predetermined, but in this there is no rigid predetermined facet formula for the compound subject. Facets are found, facets are determined by following facet analysis. Then sequence of the facets is determined by the postulates and the principles which we have in library science and which we will study in forthcoming sessions. Then these facets are arranged in a sequence. They are replaced by numbers and class numbers which are given in the schedule. And these class numbers, they are connected with one another by using different connecting symbols or digits. There is no rigidity in the number or succession of facets, and it is also called analytico-synthetic scheme of classification. That means in freely faceted classification, there is no predetermined facet formula. The facets, the various facets of a subjects are determined at the time of classification. The various facets of a subjects, they are determined by using facet analysis. After this, all these facets are put in a particular sequence by using different principles and postulates. This is followed by replacing those facets with various notations which are given in the schedules. The facets are identified, they are put in a particular sequence, and then these facets are replaced by the notations which represent them in the schedule. Once the facets have been replaced by the various notations, these notations are joined with one another by using various connecting symbols and digits. And there is no rigidity in the succession of facets. That's why it is known as freely faceted classification. It is also known as analytico-synthetic classification. CC6 is analytico-synthetic scheme of classification, because here nothing ready-made is given. A classifier has to determine the subject, has to identify the various facets using facet analysis, and then these things are to be used as, for example, we have nuts and bolts. Children use various nuts and bolts and blocks for making different toys, and similarly these numbers, these connecting digits, they also serve as nuts and bolts. The classifier has to use them as first have to analyze and synthesize the subject, and then use nuts and bolts for assigning class numbers to the various documents. As we said, different subjects are listed, and against them different notations are also listed for representing those subjects. So coming to what is that notation? Notation is nothing but it is a system of symbols used to represent the classes in a classification system. In Dewey Decimal Classification, the notation is expressed in Arabic numerals. The notation gives both the unique meaning of the class and its relation to other classes. The notation provides a universal language to identify the class and related classes, regardless of the fact that different words or language may be used to describe the class. Notation, it represents the class. For example, if we have different, in schedules we have different classes. We have, for example, in DDC we have generalia class, then we have social sciences. In social sciences we have sociology and different other subjects. Then we have mathematics, sciences, and so on and so forth. So for representing all these classes, generalia, mathematics, languages, different symbols or different notations are used. For example, when we say languages, they are represented by 400. When we say sciences, they are represented by 600. So 600 is the numeral, 300 is the numeral. So in DDC we are using Indo-Arabic numerals to represent the notation. In colon classification, the notational system of colon classification consists of ordinal numbers. Ordinal numbers, it means The numbers which are used for fixing position of entities in a sequence. When we say fourth is an ordinal number which indicates the position of a particular entity in relation to second and in relation to third and fifth. Cardinal numbers which are also used. Cardinal numbers are Indo-Arabic numerals which are used for counting and expressing measures. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4, there are 4 boys, 3 girls. These are all cardinal numbers because they are being used for counting and they expressed measures or quantity. Colon classification also uses Roman smalls. All Roman small letters are used except ILO. All Indo-Arabic numerals are used from 0 to 9. Then Roman capital letters are used, all ABC. Then Greek letter delta is also used. As we have seen that all Roman letters, then Indo-Arabic numerals, Roman capitals, and then Greek letters are being used in colon classification to represent various classes, common isolates and special isolates. So we can see that this is colon uses mixed notation. This is what is meant by mixed notation. That means we are not merely using Indo-Arabic numerals, or we are not merely using Roman smalls or Roman letters. We are using a mixed base of all these. We are using Indo-Roman smalls, we are using Roman capitals, Indo-Arabic, and all these Greek letters. So this shows the notation is mixed in nature. Now now we have which we commonly study and which the libraries commonly use all across the world to classify books or to classify documents in the libraries is Dewey Decimal Classification. At present, 23rd edition is being used. It comprises 4 volumes. First volume is Introduction. It introduces what is all about. How is it different from volume 22? Then volume 2 is Schedule. It is Organization of Knowledge, and it starts from 000 to 599. Then volume 3 is again Organization of Knowledge, which is from 600 to 999. Volume 4 is the Relative Index. Relative Index means it's an alphabetical list of subjects with the disciplines in which they are treated. They are subarranged alphabetically under each entry. It means that if we are talking of a particular, for example, roses may have medicinal value. Roses may be used in floriculture. They may have, these are the different aspects which are being, they may be dealt with. So in medicinal, they will be dealt with in the schedule of medical sciences, and they will also be dealt with in schedule of floriculture. So here under relative index, roses will be indexed, and under different aspects in which they have been studied, they have been dealt with, will also be listed. So this is what is meant by relative index. Psychology of women, or the dresses, for example, if jeans, or if the girls wear jeans, if it may be dealt with, this particular phenomenon may be dealt with psychology of women, psychology of particular dresses, which dressing which leads to different kind of psychology. So these all a particular topic which is being studied under different aspects. A particular topic is there, and the different aspects from the different perspectives or the different viewpoints from which it is being covered, these are all listed in relative index. That's why it is known as relative index. So volume 4 is about relative index. It's an alphabetical list of subjects with disciplines in which they are treated, subarranged alphabetically under each entry. Another scheme of classification is universal decimal classification. And in this, it's important to know that DDC also provides abridged edition of DDC. For example, this DDC 23 edition is available in 4 volumes. Abridged edition means shortened version of this full-fledged version, and this abridged edition is there to cater to the needs of libraries which have a collection of less than 20,000. So this is known as abridged edition, and this volume of this edition of 4 volumes is the full-fledged edition. Then you have another scheme of classification, which is universal decimal classification. It is a document indexing language in the form of classification scheme covering the whole universe of knowledge. It is designed for subject description and indexing of content of information resources, irrespective of the career, form, format and language. It has 70,000 subdivisions and it is available in more than 50 languages. As we talked of schedules, then common isolates, it has auxiliary tables, and under auxiliary tables it has common auxiliary signs, then common auxiliary numbers, then it has main tables, or which are known as schedules in DDC. Then we also have colon classification, which is available, which is there, which has been, as I said, which was developed by Dr. S.R. Ranganathan. It is available in 6th edition, 7th edition is also there in use. Many of the libraries are using. So these are some of the schemes of classification which we generally study, and we are going to take them one by one in forthcoming sessions. So today we have seen about the basic terms and terminologies which we used in the field of library classification. What are different classes, what is a subject, what is a macro subject, what is a micro subject, what is an array, what is a chain, what are basic isolates, various kinds of subjects. We have basic class, we have compound class, we have complex classes. Then sharpening of focus. Why do we do that? Extension and intention. These are the basic steps which we need to know about them, and we have covered them in our session today.
Definitely, ma'am, you have given a deep insight into this very topic, that how classification is done on the basis of the subjects. Ma'am, I would like to know, does archiving is the part of classification, or it comes after classification?
It comes after classification. Classification is here, for example, at the way libraries procure or various documents, and these documents are procured to, to be maintained, to be organized and kept in library for the users. So this organization is done by classifying, is done by keeping them in a particular sequence, and this very initial step of organizing the books which libraries procure is done through classification.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much for giving us a broad insight into this topic, and I would like to tell all the students that Dr. Tripathi would be again with us tomorrow, and we would be learning more through her. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.